In this video, I'm going to show you how to sew a super easy last-minute dress. For this project, we're going to need pins, thread, scissors, and a stretch fabric. I went with something sheer that almost has the look of chainmail. Whenever starting a new project, especially with a stretch fabric, I like to cut out little squares and practice different ways of hemming the fabric. I tried out 4 different techniques, and my favorite was just the regular fold over twice and sew with a straight stitch. So I decided to use that hemming technique for my fabric. I like to take advantage of clothes that I already have, so I'm going to use my t-shirt to trace out the armholes and the torso for my dress. I'm just roughly cutting around the armhole seams and the side seams, leaving extra fabric for seam allowance and to make adjustments. I'm then going to start cutting at a bit of an outward angle, adding about 10 extra centimeters to account for my hips, and then I'm going to use my length measurement and cut the length of the dress. I now have a very rough outline for the front of my dress. To make sure the armholes are the same, I like to fold this piece in half and then cut any adjustments that I need to. We can either do the same process that we just did to create the back piece, or I'm going to show you how to drape it on a mannequin or yourself as well. So here's the piece that we just created that I've pinned onto my mannequin. We're going to take our fabric and drape it onto the back. And then we're just going to pin the fabric to the front piece, right sides together, along the 2 side seams and the 2 shoulder seams. This is when you can make adjustments to decide how tight you want your dress. Because we're using a stretch fabric, this whole process is quite a bit more forgiving than if we weren't. Then we're going to cut the armhole, and for this you want to mimic the shape that we created for the front piece. And then you can trim away the extra fabric at the side seams. So here I'm just continuing to adjust my pins until I like the way the dress fits. And we're going to do the exact same for the shoulder seams, pinning and then trimming away the excess, remembering to leave a 1 centimeter seam allowance. This dress is going to have a slit, so for one of the sides I'm not pinning all the way to the bottom. And then I'm going to sew along the 4 seams that I just pinned. You can use a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch depending on what works better with your fabric. Because my fabric frays, I like to trim away the excess seam allowance and then go over the stitch again with a zigzag stitch to really lock in those loose threads. I'm going to do this technique for all of my seams. Once I'm finished with all of my seams, I'm going to move on to the slit. For the slit, I'm just going to do a regular hem by folding the fabric over twice and doing a straight stitch. This should be based on what hemming technique works best for your fabric. I'm going to do the same for both sides of the slit. The next step is to hem the bottom of the dress, which again we're going to do the same technique by folding the fabric over twice and hemming with a straight stitch. Again, this depends on what stitch you decided works best for your fabric. Now with the hem done, the slit done, and the bodice sewn, we're ready to cut out our sleeves. We're going to measure from the top of the shoulder to however long we want the sleeves to be, including seam allowance. And then we're going to take that measurement for the length of our sleeves. And then using the same t-shirt that we used to mock up the front of the pattern, we're going to recreate the shape of the sleeves. I like to place pins tracing out the shape of the armhole and then cut with my scissors, leaving a 1 centimeter seam allowance. I want more of a loose fit for my sleeves, so I'm just cutting straight down from the shoulder. You can use your measuring tape to make sure that the armhole measurement is similar to the measurement that you created for the bodice. Then folding right sides together, we're going to sew along with a straight stitch. Then trim away the excess and go over it again with a zigzag stitch, just like I did for all my other seams. Now with the bodice inside out and our sleeve right side out, we're going to insert the sleeve into the dress, placing the right sides of the 2 seams together. And then you're going to sew around the armhole. And we're going to do the same for both sleeves. Again with the bodice inside out and the sleeve right side out, and inserting the sleeve into the dress, lining up the 2 seams right sides together. And then I'm going to sew those 2 armhole seams, trimming away the excess and going over it again with a zigzag stitch. And then you want to do the same hemming technique that you've done for all your other edges for the bottom of your sleeves. If your fabric doesn't fray, you can also leave them all as raw edges if that's what you'd prefer to do. The final step is to deal with the neckline. I'm just going to roll it over and lock it down with a hand sewn stitch. To avoid too much pressure on this one stitch, I decided to do 2 more stitches on the sides. And then I'm going to do the exact same for the back of the neckline. And you're all done! Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, please subscribe.